It may be spooky season, but there's nothing scary about the newest batch of games hitting the Nintendo Classics app. That is, unless you count Bubsy's terrible puns. That's right, Bubsy and Claws Encounters of the Third Kind is finally coming to Nintendo Switch Online, along with Fatal Fury Special and the mouse-only Mario and Wario. Yeah, that's a pretty cool update. But are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Next Generation, Nintendo Magazine System, and more classic magazines that reviewed these games back when they first came out. Oh, I sure hope you like cat puns, because this is going to be another perfect episode of Nintendo Classics Review Crew.
Mega Shock Neo Geo!
いくつもの伝説が生まれ、そして消えてゆく。狼は眠らない。画廊伝説スペシャル。
SNK.
After releasing Fatal Fury 2 back in January, Takara had a number of options for the follow-up. For example, they could have ported a fan-favorite fighting game like Samurai Showdown. They also could have gone with something slightly more obscure like King of the Monsters. There was always Art of Fighting and World Heroes 2, both of which would have been perfect candidates for Nintendo Classics. But no, that's not what they did. Instead, we get Fatal Fury Special, which is, you guessed it, an updated version of Fatal Fury 2. Now look, to be fair, Fatal Fury Special is a great Neo Geo game and a fantastic update to an already solid SNK fighter. If anything, this is the game that they probably should have released back in January. Alright, yeah, I'll admit I'm a little annoyed, but so were the critics. Let's see what they said back in 1995. We're going to start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, which ended up giving Fatal Fury Special one of the highest scores of any magazine, a 7.4 out of 10. While that may sound a bit low, what we see here is actually a big disagreement amongst the critics. L gave the game a 6.5, the lowest score of any of the EGM critics. It's a step down, but the Super NES version of one of the Neo Geo's best fighting series isn't a bad fighter at all. The graphics are the best on any platform outside of the original format, and the control is decent. Word of warning, if you don't have a joystick controller, you're gonna have a very difficult time executing the fatal moves. The only other gripe I have is that the sounds are a bit annoying, especially with the surround sound. You have to resort to the binaural setting. Fake Ninja Sushi X liked the game a lot more, arguing that this is a good rendition of the Neo game. The characters are reproduced faithfully, and the moves seem to come off relatively easy. The graphics are a bit grainy looking, especially if you're used to the Neo version, but they're still good. The biggest drawback is the sound system. The Dolby effect, or whatever they were trying for, makes it sound like you're fighting in a tunnel. Now, when it comes to the other magazines, you saw Game Players give the game a 74%, the exact same score as EGM. Nintendo Power went a bit lower, giving Fatal Fury Special a 3.2 out of 5, while Game Informer opted for an average of 6.25 out of 10. Ross, the rebel gamer, confessed that he couldn't see much of a difference between Fatal Fury Special and Fatal Fury 2. Sure, there might be a few returning characters like Duck King and a new option countdown, but it is basically the same game with the same old rehashed gameplay. I do like the updated graphics and animation on the background though. I recommend that if you have Fatal Fury 2, you should keep that one and let the newcomers pick up this one. Going even lower, we see GamePro break from their usual giving out perfect scores in order to give Fatal Fury Special a mere 3 out of 5. And then there's GamePro, which went all the way down to a pitiful 2 out of 5. Let's face it, sprite-based 2D fighting games are a dime a dozen, and and in spite of the impressive Dolby Surround, all this one really has going for it is sheer size. 15 characters and 5 special moves apiece, some of which are slick, but none of which you haven't pulled off in some other game of its ilk. Fatal Fury Special is too little, too late. Now, believe it or not, there was an outlier that not only liked Fatal Fury Special, but gave it one of the highest scores of the year. I'm talking about Nintendo Magazine System, which went all the way up to a 92%. That's the highest score you can find, and it's not even close. When a game doesn't promote itself as a sequel and instead chooses Turbo, or in this case Special, the question of difference becomes especially important. Is this all that different from Fatal Fury 2? Well, there are only 3 new characters to control, and they're not strictly new anyway. There are more combos, and the 32 meg power means that it's faster and looks smarter. So is this just a paint job? It's difficult to say, and not really that important. What Fatal Fury Special is, at the end of the day, is a superb fighting game. The Dolby Surround sound is the icing on the cake, giving Fatal Fury Special a real arcade quality. It might not be radically different from its predecessors, but it's very good indeed. Okay, what's going on with the Dolby Surround? Some critics complain that it's like you're fighting in a tunnel, while others seem to think that it's a revelation. You normally don't see people that divided about sound quality. Well, either way, even with Nintendo Magazine's high score, down sharply from the 73% we saw from Fatal Fury 2. Yeah, I still think Takara should have ported Samurai Showdown or King of the Monsters or something else. Given that Mario is one of the most popular characters in the entire world, you'd think that all of Nintendo's Mario games would have found their way to the United States. And yet, here we have Mario and Wario, a Super Nintendo game that, despite being entirely in English, was never released outside of Japan. Developed by Pokemon creator Satoshi Tajiri, Mario and Wario actually started its life as a Super Scope game before scrapping those plans and going with the Super NES mouse instead. This is an odd little puzzler that sees players choosing between Mario, Yoshi, and Princess Peach in order to beat 100 bite-sized stages. It's a cool oddity, but what did the critics say? Now, despite being a Japanese exclusive in the 1990s, there actually were a few English-language magazines that reviewed Mario and Wario back in the day. Let's just go ahead and start at the bottom and work our way up, beginning with Total, which gave the game a low 62%. They liked the cartoony graphics and the crazy Mario-style tunes, but they complained that it was too short. Potentially world-beating stuff, but let down badly by an incredibly low difficulty grading. Its simplistic strategy gameplay may keep small children amused, though. Now, things are a little bit more positive over at Super Play, which gave Mario and Wario a so-so 70%. For those keeping track, that's the 336th highest scoring game Super Play reviewed out of around 600. Yoshi's Cookie is the nearest thing I can think of. This is no bad thing because, like Yoshi's Cookie, you insist on having another go and another. So what about it then? It's fun, it's simple to understand, but it gets tough and it's all a bit samey. Not a classic. When it comes to the highest score, that belongs to Nintendo Magazine System, which gave the puzzler an 81%. That's a recommendation, right? If Nintendo were hoping to sell their mouse on the back of this title, they're going to be a little disappointed. For while the whole package looks, sounds, and plays brilliantly, there's something about the game that leaves you wanting more. Perhaps it's something to do with the fact that for the first few levels, the puzzles are so tediously easy that it's difficult to maintain any interest. Things do improve, but in the harder levels, the real battle is between you and the mouse as opposed to against the game. Another thing, seeing as this is a Mario spin-off, is it really a good idea that we only see him with a bucket over his head? If you're looking for a good excuse to get the mouse, take a look at the great King Arthur's World and use this as a follow-up. Not bad, but not brill. Yeah, there seems to be some real disagreement about how challenging Mario and Wario is. But I don't know, that may come down to how good you are at these sorts of puzzle games. The overall score is 71%, which certainly isn't bad, but maybe not the score that you would expect from a Nintendo-published Mario game. That said, given that you've probably never played this game before, it's worth it, just to be a Mario completist. Just don't forget to bring a mouse.
Marioがワリオに目隠しされた負けるな頑張れマリオ僕らがマウスで連れて行こうマリオ危うしマウスで妖精を操ってマリオをゴールへ導け楽しさなんとオール100面スーパーファミコンで新登場マリオとワリオだよマウスで楽しいマリオペイントもよろしく
Bubsy the Bobcat is a tough character to talk about because while he's nowhere near as bad as what modern critics would like you to believe, he's also just the perfect embodiment of the 1990s gluttony for mascot characters with extreme attitudes. He's one of the million snarky animal heroes that were born out of the success of Sonic the Hedgehog, and he shot onto the scene with a level of bravado that was both unearned and just impossible to live up to. There's a weird tug-of-war happening where on one hand he's a cartoon cat that was clearly inspired by Looney Tunes, yet the other side wants him to be as effortlessly cool as like Sonic the Hedgehog or Earthworm Jim. Of course, the problem is that neither he nor his games are good enough to live up to the potential of either of those sides, leaving us in what is a very frustrating draw. Of course, all that is easy to say in retrospect, but what about at the time? For a character who often finds himself on a bunch of worst of lists, Bubsy the Bobcat actually started his life with the critics giving him all the charity in the world. While most of the reviews for Claw's Encounters of the Furred Kind are not on the same level as, say, Mario or Sonic, I think it's safe to say that the critics actually started out liking Bubsy. That's certainly the case with Electronic Gaming Monthly, who gave his first adventure an average score of 8 out of 10. Ed came out on the side of loving Bubsy, asking straight up if 1993 was the year of the Bobcat. After playing this card, I can truly say the game is terrific. Bubsy's tons of animation really add a humorous side to the game, and his voice before each level is also funny. The level effects are great, with colorful graphics and many hidden areas to find. What more could you ask for? Steve, on the other hand, was not as impressed, giving the game a 7. While I enjoyed the detail in Bubsy, the play mechanics and lack of diversified technique to learn and master brought this cart down a couple of points. All the elements are here, but a lot of the finesse that similar games demand just isn't found here. EGM's 8 out of 10 is pretty close to the average across all magazines. That's the same score you saw from Mean Machine Sega in their 11th issue, and Computer and Video Games went a little bit higher, giving it an 81%. You also saw Die Hard Game Fan give the Super NES version of the game an 83%, while the Genesis version was just 1 point higher, coming in with an 84%. Of course, the highest score came from GamePro, who gave both versions a perfect 5 out of 5. They raved that Bubsy is a must for any gamer's library. On the trail of Sonic the Hedgehog, this cat really moves. He may not be as fast as Sonic, but he definitely has a lot more personality. Oh boy. Unfortunately, not all the reviews were that positive. In fact, there were a few critics that were not fully won over by Bubsy's charm. For example, Video Games and Computer Entertainment scored the game a slightly low 7.8 out of 10. Same as Superplay, who gave it a 77%, making it the magazine's 246th best reviewed Super NES game. SNES Force averaged a score of 70%, though that score would have been much lower if Will had been the sole reviewer. If the programmers wanted a speedy Sonic-type game, why'd they make Bubsy a one-hit-and-die character, then put enemies virtually every 2 inches? Bubsy just doesn't have the speed of play. Sure, he can move as fast as Sonic, but he can't make long sprints until the background blurs because he hits a baddie every 2 seconds and has to redo the level. There are some nice graphics, nice touches here and there, but Bubsy is just too frustrating. This cat is lucky there's no Hedgehog on Nintendo. Other low scores include Megatech giving the Genesis version a 74%, and Sega Power giving it an even lower 69%. Nice. The score that surprised me the most came from Nintendo Power, which gave Bubsy a 3.5 out of 5. That may not sound so bad, but it's actually shockingly low for the magazine. They raved that this has some of the best character animation ever seen in a video game, as well as speed, challenge, and 16 ways to bite the big one. They called it one of the best character action games around. However, they felt that during high jumps, the multi-background parallax view can cause havoc to your sense of direction and placement, resulting in poor landings. Despite a few negative tags, this first Bubsy was mostly liked. It earned an overall average of 81%, which is probably a lot higher than you were expecting. Haha, talk about a twist ending.
100 Mega Shock Neo Geo!
いくつもの伝説が生まれ、そして消えてゆく。狼は眠らない。画廊伝説スペシャル。
SNK.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this one every time classic games get added to modern consoles. Now, here's the question I have for you. Does Bubsy the Bobcat deserve the hate? If you're on YouTube, then you'll regularly see him featured as one of the worst characters of all time. But do you agree? Let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back tomorrow with a brand new review. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,